We are streaming now, Laila.
Yes, we're live now.
Okay. We're back. With great pleasure, I would like to welcome our first plenary speaker, Dr. Deena Boraie. Dr. Deena Boraie is the Vice President for Student Life at the American University in Cairo. She's currently the Senior Advisor to Egypt Minister of Education for Assessment, Examinations, and Curriculum. Dr. Boraie is a language testing expert and assessment and evaluation consultant and trainer with extensive experience working with education projects in organizations in Egypt and the region. She's a trustee of the International Research Foundation for English Language Education. She's past president of the NileTESOL International Association, a large US-based international association for teachers of English to speakers of other languages. She's published and presented extensively at international conferences on assessment, literacy, language testing and assessment, teacher beliefs, students and teacher motivation, teacher professional development, and English as a lingua franca. Dr. Boraie holds a PhD in education, mainly language testing, from the University of Wolverhampton in the UK. Thank you, Dr. Boraie. We're pleased to have you with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for a very nice introduction, and I really appreciate all what you said, and thank you, Laila Sirti, co-chair of the NileTESOL conference this year, and I know what a responsibility it is, so thank you for doing it. Now, good afternoon, everyone, colleagues, friends. I'm delighted to be back in NileTESOL. I've missed you. I've always been following NileTESOL, and I will always continue to follow NileTESOL's activities. I always participate in the elections of the president, and I'm very, very proud of what NileTESOL is doing. It is part of my history and what I love doing. I want to thank very much the co-chair of the conference this year, to Rania Job, my dear friend and colleague. She gave me the greatest honor of being invited as a plenary speaker for NileTESOL. You know, I've done so many plenaries all over the world, including TESOL International, my other home in the States. But being invited to give a plenary to NileTESOL is very close to my heart, and it is one of the highest honors in my career. So thank you, Rania Jabr, for making this happen. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank another very, very dear friend and colleague, Hanan Faris. I know she's the lady behind the scenes in SCE. And I want to thank you, Hanan, again, as always, for making it happen year after year. I also want to thank my lovely colleague, Dean Ketterer, for the very kind words he said in the introductions. Having said this, I want to jump into my presentation right away. I will share my screen with the slides, and here we go. I hope it works. I really liked your theme this year, NileTESOL. I love the idea of focusing on the new normal, because this is what we've had to do in COVID, and we've had to all learn to use new technologies, and me too. And we had to move from just teaching to managing students' learning in a different way. And none of our professional development programs, none of our training as language teachers prepared us for this. So today, what I wanted to talk about is, I'm not sure, I haven't been able to move my screen. I wanted to go to the next slide. Laila, can you help me in any way? Talking of technology, I'm not getting the slide to move.
Dr. Deena, if you hover on the screen, the left of the screen, the bottom left, you'll find arrows.
Oh, okay. Let me try a new share.
Okay.
I don't know if that's going to work. Do you see my screen? I apologize, everyone. This is my not very doing PowerPoints on screen. Can you see my screen, Leila?
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Today I want to talk about COVID-19 and teacher professional development. I'm going to talk about the science of learning, social emotional learning, SEL, which is there's so much buzz about it nowadays, and I will talk in a little bit of detail about it. And finally, I want to discuss the myths in teacher professional development. Now, as all of the presenters talked about in the welcome speeches, and talked about the reality of what we have gone through today, and in the last, actually until today, from the last 2 years, COVID's negative impact on our students' learning. We know that students have experienced language loss. Students have experienced unfinished learning. They face negative psychological effects of being isolated, learning from their homes, not able to pay attention onto the screens all the time. And I've also witnessed the same with students with our students at AUC. And so really it was a very, very difficult last semester or last term for all of us teachers. When the students came back to face, it was still difficult. And we all struggled to balance between the students' academic life and their social emotional learning part. I had students coming into my office feeling very, very unfamiliar with their going back to on-the-ground learning. I had an A student. She was telling me, Dr. Deena, I feel my brain has become stupid. I can't learn anymore. And so these are realities that we are facing as teachers, whether with the online learning or even coming back after a while of online learning. It is new roles and responsibilities that we have to assume as teachers, and we haven't been trained in this. We were never, of course, nobody expected it. I'm not blaming anyone, but the fact is that we weren't prepared. And so one of the things that in my reading and looking into seeing what new research and what new ideas can help me manage and deal with students, I turned to the science of learning. And I have to say that was one of the very interesting phases in my readings or in my professional development, was to learn about the science of learning. Actually, the science of learning is a relatively young field. It is multidisciplinary, and it is all about looking at how students learn, or how humans learn, really. And it's a body of research, an accumulated body of knowledge about the nature and processes of student learning. Now, I wanted to be very clear as language teachers that the science of learning is not the learning of science or the learning of physics or chemistry or biology. No, it is different. And it's all about student learning. And of course, we want to make sure that when you look up the science of learning, don't get confused with the studying of science or the teaching of science. Now, the science of learning the research is done by psychologists, by neuroscientists and other learning researchers. And as I said, they study the ways in which we as human beings acquire knowledge, skills, and competencies. And they also give a lot of feedback, and they give a lot of insights and answer questions of why some strategies or learning strategies work better than others, or some work worse than others. So it helps us understand as teachers what should we do best and most effectively. Now, the problem is that I found out by chance about the science of learning because it wasn't in any of the professional development or teacher preparation programs. And in general, not many professional development programs discuss the science of learning, because the reality is it's a lot of research done by, as I just said, those cognitive scientists, the neuroscientists, and we as teachers, we don't have time to look for this excellent research, to read the research, and then to see how we can apply this research in our classrooms. And honestly, sometimes this research is not available to teachers because it's not easy to get access to this kind of research and different types of research. So this is why I'm talking about it today, so that we all as teachers, we want to ask and make sure that our professional development programs talk about the science of learning. One of the things that, of course, me with my background as an assessment specialist and my interest in testing, it goes back many years. One of the interesting things that the science of learning emphasizes is that tests are really powerful learning events, that tests are seen by the scientists or by the research that comes out of science of learning, that they are powerful learning events, and they're not just tools we use to give grades or to evaluate or to assess students' performance in our classes. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit more about this. And the interesting research that we also that comes from science of learning, which I haven't gone into, is how artificial intelligence and enhanced technologies in the classroom can be very effective. Now, this is a whole new era of using these artificial intelligence embedded in the technologies and platforms that are available for teachers to use in schools now. Again, it does, these technologies enhance learning too, but this is just a mention. I'm not going to go into detail today. What I will mention in detail is the social emotional learning, better known as SEL. SEL now is all over the world, and we need to make sure that we deal with SEL and we talk about it in detail in our professional development programs. Now, one of the things that we used to think, I remember studying and taking my TESOL courses, that they talk about the critical period for language learning, that the younger our students are, the better or the easier it will be for them to acquire a language. So our old thinking, we used to think that language learning was dependent on age and having a young brain. But the reality is that this is not the thinking. I mean, the science of learning has showed us that this is no longer the idea that we are able to learn at an older age, and I will talk a little bit more about that. So let me talk about SEL. If you're going to be following TESOL International this year in March, you will hear, or hopefully you can join, a lot of sessions about social emotional learning, because this is one of the very, very interesting discussions we're having all over the world in TESOL about SEL. And this is an outcome of COVID-19 and what we've experienced as teachers. What I wanted to say is that for SEL, because we used to separate academics from emotions, and social emotional learning was not really part of our repertoire as teachers. But nowadays, we now look back and we think that was a false dichotomy, and we must learn about how the emotions and the social emotional learning path of our students. And one of the interesting things that they say, or the science of learning says, that learning happens when the brain feels safe and supported, because this is very much us as human beings, if we are, if our brain is not ready to learn because of external factors, then we no matter what we do as teachers, we can't get the students to learn. So this is one of the interesting outcomes of the science of learning. And we know that positive relationships make a huge difference in students' learning. We know now from the science of learning that effective learning is a combination of hands-on, minds-on, and the new addition from science of learning is hearts-on approaches, where we take into consideration that other side of students, the emotional and the mental health and the well-being of students. Because as teachers, if we don't deal with that side of the students, then the results won't be necessarily successful for particular students, especially during COVID, especially if students are going through a very hard time at home. What we know is that poor learning, I want to make it very clear that when we say poor learning from COVID, it may be due to CEL, because COVID was a very stressful time for all of us, where students had to do what I just talked about learning from home, trying to sit with a laptop in a bedroom or in a home that was not comfortable for a student to learn. This was very, very difficult. And so relationships or negative experiences that students go through can affect learning. And even if students are very smart and very clever and have the potential for learning, but the disruption and the negative relationships can really lead to learning loss, unfinished learning. What is really important, and we have now, the science of learning says that even if students have very bad conditions, emotional conditions at home, their learning can be enhanced and they can be successful by just having one adult in their life. It could be the teacher at school or the professor in a university. And with that one person's support, it could lead to a student who is a failing student to pass, or a student to even get high GPAs or high grades. This is what the science of learning says. And so what we should do, or what we should demand in professional development programs and training, is that we are trained to understand if a student has this potential, high potential, and has stress, and such that we are able to deal with their mental health issues. We need to understand as teachers how to support students' mental health. We weren't prepared in our professional programs. And we also must acquire, or we must go into the mode of demonstrating additional empathy than we used to. And we have to develop the social and emotional skills of children or of our young adults at the university, so that we are able to manage the learning in a much more effective manner, and that we create a very, very positive environment in the classroom. Because once a student goes through stress, we know that we can lose them, and that no matter what we do, we need to first focus on their emotions, and then we focus on the brain. The brain has to be safe. The brain cannot be distracted. One of the interesting things is that if we understand as teachers how our brains work, that emotions are very, very important, we'll be much more effective. Do you know that our brains are super malleable? That is, we know the old theory of brain development was that brains were supposed to be matured by the age of 6. And that was the old thinking. Right now, the cognitive scientists say that our brains are malleable and the brain continues to develop and change and grow until our 20s. So the science of learning tells us that students at all ages, whether they're young or high school, or even our university students, we can never predict how they feel, how they think, because their brain is still changing. It is still growing and developing. And it is the most difficult years that we as teachers are dealing with those young, our young students as their brain develops into the 20s. And as I just said, that one relationship with one teacher or one mentor can have a huge impact on our student. Because what the science of learning has found, that if a student is facing aggressive or aggression at home, or even just huge anxiety and stress, what happens is, unfortunately, under stress, under such conditions, the brain, unfortunately, becomes aggressive or favors the negative conditions. And then what happens is that the cognition of the ability of the brain, reasoning and memory goes down at the expense of those negative feelings. So it's a physical phenomena in the brain. And what we can do, believe it or not, is that we can give a lot of empathy and deal with the student. The student will trust us and feel safe, and that will have an impact, a positive impact on our learning, according to the science of learning. In spite of, believe it or not, the negative experience at home, we can have a huge impact on one or two students, and we can even save them. One of the things that I've gone on and on about social and emotional learning. SEL has now played a central role in our profession as teachers, and I hope you would go and explore it further. And I have tried it, and I've tried some of these techniques, and there is a positive impact. I can't say for everybody, but I've had a few very successful cases in the past few months. I've been able to help students just by listening and talking to them. I want to make a comment that, you know, as teachers and as faculty, we ourselves have gone through a lot of chaos and experience and negative experiences in COVID. And of course, the silver lining that I'm seeing about this science of learning and so on is that even for us as teachers, that we need a much more human or empathetic approach for us as teachers in the workplace. That is, I believe we need a more human approach by our employers. They need to use tools to help our brains as teachers and to help us stay connected, to feel and to support our own well-being. Of course, I'm not going to go further than just saying that this is another story and this is another discussion, but we also should, somebody should also look at us and our profession and our needs as teachers. Additional, as I said, I started earlier about the additional insights from the science of learning about how plastic our brain is and how our brain is built for lifelong learning. And actually what the researchers say, that age doesn't matter. Our brains are capable of learning new languages, whether we are 20, 40, or 60 years old, we can learn a new language from scratch. And so according to the cognitive scientists, that age does not put us at an advantage in learning languages. I found a study, an interesting study. It was conducted in 2016 by Feniger and Singleton, and they investigated this very point. They investigated whether early language classroom instruction was more beneficial than starting later. and they did a quantitative and a qualitative study, and they had very interesting results that showed late learners outperformed those with early language learning on a variety of language skills. And so their conclusion was that it's not about the critical period where students have to be young in order for us to start teaching a second language, like whether French or English or German and so on. It is actually individual in motivation that is much stronger than just introducing language learning in at an early age. And that's one of the interesting things that I think one should consider, that we as English teachers, we have seen, I have seen it, that acquiring a language is not dependent on age, and that when students are forced to learn a second language or a foreign language, and they don't really want to, or they don't see the need for learning the language, they never really go beyond good morning, how are you, my name is blah, blah, blah. And I think that it is the motivation. I do believe it is motivation that pushes you. It is your attitude and your expectations and why you want to learn a language. So if we have a young person or an old person living in a small town or a small village, and this person really wants to learn English, that person will. And vice versa, if a young person sees no need for English in his or her life, there's no motivation. And so even starting English early from grade 1 and grade 2 may not get the results we want. Because, so that was, these are the implications from the science of learning, especially learning languages. I found that very interesting. And I don't know what you would think about this. Again, moving on to additional insights that I got from the science of learning. Not exactly great surprises, but it is also about the a little bit, it tweaks a little bit more about insights into how our brains work. We talk, the science of learning talk about several high impact instructional practices, and I'm going to just discuss 3 of them. The first one is how to encourage active recall. And the science of learning says that we must not push information into our students' brains, but we must all the time keep pulling information from students' brains. So don't push, teachers, please pull information from their memories. So they say, if you retrieve something from memory, the student will have stronger retention of that information. And therefore, what they say, those learning scientists say that quizzing, and when I say quizzing, it could be asking questions in class, or just giving a small exercise at the end of class and say, students, here are some questions, get out a piece of paper and answer these questions. Quizzing is one of the most potent retrieval practices, and it's a high impact instructional practice. And quizzing in this case is part of a teaching learning technique, and it is not about grades at all. It is helping students to pull information out of their memories, either verbally or on a paper, and this helps their learning. And you should tell your students that if they spend time studying the same material over and over, tell them, give yourself a test, do tests. This helps in learning. The active recall has been shown that we need to keep pulling information and not pushing information into the brain. A second high impact instructional practice is something not at all new for us language teachers. It's called interleaving, mixing topics in the classroom, where they get students to practice a bunch of skills together. And because they say when you give if you mix a lot of skills together, it boosts long-term retention. So when we combine, we always do that as teachers, reading and writing, listening and speaking. This is what we do naturally, and what the advice from the science of learning says: mix all the 4 skills together. The more, the better. So, and this is the latest trend even for teaching math, for example. You know, now in the teaching math, they combine addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication all together in one lesson, because they found that this will better develop the mathematics skills of students. So, and for example, if teacher is teaching literature, say you ask them to analyze 2 authors' approaches to character and plot development, and encourage students to decide which techniques that would apply to their own writing. So instead of asking them to analyze 1 plot development, 1 character, 1 novel, combine it with 2. We don't just talk about book by book separately. It is mixing. It is, to be honest, it is complexity. Adding complexity will enhance learning, and not doing it the old way, 1 by 1 approach. That's what the learning scientists say. Of course, I want to say that teachers who have not been trained in this method may be very, very shocked, because they will think that it is very complicated and it's making teaching very difficult. But that is what the science of learning says, is that we have to mix topics in lessons. And the third high impact instructional practice that I want to briefly discuss is delayed feedback, which I think we as teachers, we realize that, but we have to always remember that we practice it, because again, the research has shown that really helps. This helps us. Delaying the feedback briefly. So when we give students feedback about their work, they say delayed feedback is better than than immediate feedback, because then long-term learning happens when we give them delayed feedback, which is, I think, understandable, because students have to have time to think about it. And the interesting thing is that if we keep giving feedback in class when we ask a question and then give the feedback right away, then they will always become dependent on us being corrected. We are correcting them, especially as language teachers. And so when they go out of class and they make their, they use the language, nobody gives them feedback. So that's the important thing. They should start, we should not get them dependent on us correcting and giving feedback all the time. Now, what I want to do next is show you a video. And please bear with me, because this is one of the things that I've been trained on today, thanks to my wonderful friend who is a real techie, Rania Job. So I will do my best. To share the video.
This video is about learning.
Can you hear? I
can hear perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've passed this first test. Okay, I have to say I'm very proud of myself. You're witnessing the first time, because all my videos that I used before was face-to-face on a stage. So this is the first time I've done it on. And what I'm going to do is, I want you to listen to this video. I'm going to do 5 segments, and I want you to make sure that that it's clear. And if there's anything, please tell me it's not. So Laila, it's clear?
Yes.
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 Part of this video was sponsored by Google Search. There is this idea in education that everyone has their own preferred way of learning, their so-called learning style. If information is presented in accordance with the learning style, well, then they'll learn better. Now, there are dozens of different learning style theories, but the most common one identifies 4 main learning styles: visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic, or VARK for short. Visual learners learn best from images, demonstrations, and pictures.
People may say things, but I can't really take it in. I just got to see them act it out or write it or something.
Auditory learners learn best from listening to an explanation.
Like in school, I was always engaged in a lecture, and that was usually good enough to pass a test.
Reading, writing learners learn best from reading and writing.
Like I can get pretty much anything out of reading a textbook or something.
And kinesthetic learners learn best by doing, physically interacting with the world.
Hands-on. You have to touch things, you have to play with things. It's a contact sport. You have to do it yourself. You have to play with things. It's a contact sport. It's a contact sport.
Sorry, I was trying to stop it. Now there's a next segment. So that we have now talked about learning styles and what the...
Now, learning styles make intuitive sense because we know everyone is different. Some people have better spatial reasoning, others have better listening comprehension. We know some people are better readers, while others are good with their hands.
It sort of very much fits with a broad strain of thought in sort of the recent Western tradition is like, we're all unique, we're all different. And so you don't want to say like everybody learns the same way. That sort of conflicts with our feelings about what it means to be human.
So doesn't it make sense that people should learn better in their own preferred learning style? Well, teachers certainly seem to think so. A survey of nearly 400 teachers from the UK and the Netherlands found that over 90% believed that individuals learn better when they receive information in their preferred learning style.
Just like every professor has a different style of teaching, you have a different style of learning.
But when
Now I'm going to do...
this teacher starts using visuals, Jonathan finds it...
I'm going to do another excerpt because I didn't want to go through the whole video with you all.
Styles, then teachers need to do 2 things. First, identify the learning style of each of their students. And second, teach each student in accordance with their learning style. On the VARK website, it says, once you know about VARK, its power to explain things will be a revelation. But before you take an online learning styles quiz, it's a good idea to ask, do learning styles even exist? I mean, do you have one? And if you're taught in accordance with it, would you learn better? Well, you could test the accordance with it. Would you learn better? So
this is the question. This is the key question. And they did some research and experiments. The scientists or the cognitive scientists did that. And here is what is the conclusion regarding learning styles. Because the research has been done now.
Consistently conclude there is no credible evidence that learning styles exist. In a 2009 review, the researchers note the contrast between the enormous popularity of the learning styles approach within education and the lack of credible evidence for its utility is, in our opinion, striking and disturbing. If classification of students' learning styles has practical utility, it remains to be demonstrated.
What we're expecting is if your style was honored, you're going to perform better than if you had some experience that conflicted with your style. And this is where we don't see any support for the learning styles theory.
One of the reasons many people find learning styles so convincing is because they already believe it to be true. For example, they may already think that they're a visual learner, and then when a teacher shows them a diagram of, say, a bike pump, and suddenly the concept clicks, well, they interpret this as evidence for their visual learning style.
You already believe that learning styles is right. When you have an experience, the first thing you think is that in some way consistent with learning styles? And if it is, you don't think further.
When in reality, that diagram might just be a great diagram that would have helped anyone learn. When we already believe the world to be a certain way, then we interpret new experiences to fit with those beliefs, whether they actually do or not. So if learning styles don't improve learning, then what does? Well, there's a large body of literature that supports the claim that everyone learns better with multimodal approaches, where words and pictures are presented together rather than either words or pictures alone.
Now, this is the last segment of this video that I'm going to play for you.
The most important thing for learning is not the way the information is presented, but what is happening inside the learner's head. People learn best when they're actively thinking about the material, solving problems or imagining what happens if different variables change. I talked about how and why we learn best in my video, The Science of Thinking, so check that out. Now, the truth is there are many evidence-based teaching methods that improve learning. Learning styles is just not one of them. And it is likely, given the prevalence of the learning styles misconception, that it actually makes learning worse. I mean, learning styles give teachers unnecessary things to worry about, and they may make some students reluctant to engage with certain types of instruction. And all the time and money spent on learning styles and related training could be better spent on interventions that actually improve learning. You are not a visual learner, nor an auditory learner, nor a kinesthetic learner. Or more accurately, you are all these kinds of learner in one. The best learning experiences are those that involve multiple different ways of understanding the same thing. And best of all,
let me try and share my screen again. Just a second, everyone. I'm not sure this is the right thing. Can you see my screen? Is it?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to move it. Am I on the right?
this video is about
Oh,
learning
no, I don't want
styles.
this
What
video.
kind of learner are you?
I can't move the this.
Oh, yeah, I'm a visual person, so like I could see things. Yeah.
I think
I have a couple of slides left. How can I? What?
We can unshare, then share again with the right slide.
Let me try it again. Does it work now?
Yes, we can see the whole presentation now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry for this.
The video again.
Okay. All right. So, of course, it's hard for me because I can't see your faces, but I just wanted to say that, you know, for many years, I gave a lot of workshops on learning styles. I'm equally guilty. I believed in learning styles, and I actually practiced them in class and encouraged students. And then here is what the research has just told us, that what we were doing was not the right thing, even though that until today in the US and in many places in the world, it is still very popular with teachers, K-12 teachers, with teacher education programs. And even I was very interested to note that a researcher called Alan English said that he found that learning styles were mentioned in some of the US state standards and in their policies. So unfortunately, now we have to admit and we have to move away from learning styles. And it will take us a long time because we don't have teacher professional programs and teacher preparation programs that are based on the principles of the science of learning. And we need to, as teachers, to, you know, actually demand that we have professional development programs that are based on the latest research. And we have to make sure that the theory and our practice, it's like what Dr. Redeshimi said, we need to bridge theory and practice. And we need to make sure that all our standards for teaching are research-based. And it's not based on theories that were not really proven to be something that we should depend on. And these unscientific beliefs, these myths like the learning styles, we should really stop thinking about them, and we shouldn't even discuss them anymore and move away from them. And just one of the things that I want to end with is that one of the professors that I read a lot, the Stanford, her name is Dr. Linda Darling Hammond. She's a Stanford professor of education. And she said that to summarize the latest trends in teaching and learning is that we all learn in a state of positive emotion, much more effectively than when we do in a state of negative emotion. And that we have to understand that our brain functions and grows in a safe environment, and it needs warmth, and it actually needs hugs. Our brains needs hugs. And so what I'm saying to all of you, I'm sending you all tons of hugs, electronic hugs, and thank you so much for listening to me, wonderful teachers. And I'm ready to take any questions. Laila, is it, or how does this work? Or is this the end of the session?
Thank you so much, Dr. Deena. It was a very thought-provoking discussion. Some of our guests are saying in the chat box that they're shocked to hear that because they've been teaching learning styles for quite a while.
I know.
I'm another one who does so. Thank you so much for letting us know. Some of the questions that we have are related to multiple intelligence. So if we're going to say that learning styles do not have to lead to better learning, does it mean that we disagree with the idea of having multiple intelligence altogether?
No, I think that that's what they're saying, that the research has shown that we don't have that one style. On the contrary, I think the multiple intelligences would be supported by the science of learning. As I said, when I turned to the science of learning during this pandemic, and I was reading a lot about the social-emotional learning, about CEL, I didn't go into multiple intelligences, but I'm sure that multiple intelligences will be supported by the science of learning, because they talk about none of us have just one intelligence. We have multiple. So I do think that's the trend these days. But of course, I'm not a cognitive scientist. So a wonderful question. And I will go and read more about this regarding MI, multiple intelligence, and what the science of learning says about it. And by the way, Laila and all my colleagues, I was like you. When I found out about the learning styles, it was part of my training and my teaching and my professional development workshops. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. We just learn all the time.
Some people are asking if you can suggest any extra readings on CEL, if we want to take it from here. What?
I know that there was this, I read a recent article by a colleague. I can send it. I don't have, of course, the reference right now, but I can send it to you, Laila, later on, because
we can post it on Facebook.
It's a brand new article, Laila, and it's going to be presented in TESOL International in March. And I was lucky, I was able to read it beforehand. I got a sneak preview.
Okay, perfect. Maybe if we can share the link or the title, I can
post
a comment on Facebook to your amazing session.
I promise that. Yes, it's a lovely article. It was really it's practical, and it's for us, for language classroom language teachers.
Yes. We have another question here. How can we as teachers combine between the different learning techniques and the large number of students we have in class?
I'm going to be very, very brutally frank.
Okay.
No matter how wonderful we are, There is a maximum capacity of students we can teach. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I can teach more than 30 students. I really can't. No matter how experienced I am and how I love teaching. And so when we talk about classroom size, there is a limit. And we as teachers, it's hard when we talk about cell and look at the emotions of our students. We can't handle over that number. So I'm really sorry, but the reality is that our workplaces put us in these impossible situations. And all I can say is for you wonderful teachers who are teaching over 30 students in your class, you're amazing. And I know you're doing your best, but that's what the best is. It's impossible for you to give individual attention to more than that. It doesn't make sense.
Thank you so
in my humble opinion. And I know even in our schools in Egypt, we have classrooms that can reach up to 100 students in class. And it's just very hard.
Yeah. We have one more question. Does multi-sensory theory make sense now? Like, I mean that, does it really explain learning styles and combining senses together?
I think there is consensus that it's like when we watch that video about learning styles, there's no such thing that we have a learning style, and that learning has to happen in using all our senses, using all our intelligences. So I do believe that, but again, remember, I'm not a cognitive scientist, so I have just discovered the science of learning. As I told you recently, as of COVID, I started reading about dealing with students' negative mindsets and negative emotions that I'm getting students at AUC, and I'm dealing with them. So this is what led me to all this reading. So I can't claim I'm a researcher, but I just claim that it has helped me a lot in my work with one-to-one sessions with students.
Okay, thank you so much. Maybe one more question. Somebody's asking if you can share with us some tips or tricks on how you deal with student stress and anxiety.
It takes a lot of time, I have to tell you. It's usually face-to-face. I do it on Zoom. I did it when at AUC we had such a big dausha when the students were very upset with us last year, and in fact we had students making a little mini revolution that they were really angry with us. And I spent a lot of time on Zoom. I gave appointments and I would give them an hour and I talked to them. It took me hours. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but I get through to some of them. You can't expect to succeed with everyone. And these were not my classroom students, were students at AUC. So, and they said that I helped, I comforted them, I gave them, I boosted them. That's what the feedback was. Not all gave me feedback or positive feedback. So this is what I mean, this is the idea of us as teachers helping that part of the learning process by being as empathetic as we can. Empathy is, rather than using the force, being empathetic with students makes these brain hugs, if you will, giving brain hugs to our students, rather than the stick approach.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Now, and so I know it's difficult regarding the myth of learning styles, and we've been so used to it, and we have to walk away from it. We have to walk away from it. There is no such thing as learning styles exist. It is, we teach everybody in different ways, whether it's using pictures, whether it's writing, getting them to write. Students have to master all this, and there is no one way of learning at all. So we have to move away. I know it's shocking, but the researcher, the one who was presenting this video, is talking about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I know it's shocking. I do. I have to say, I'm equally guilty. And it took me a while. I read the research, and khalas, I accept it. We have to deal with change, and that's the beauty of research. that the researchers do this research and they help us grow as teachers and develop. And we should also expect our professional development programs to give us the latest, always. We should demand that. That's our right as teachers. We don't have the time to read, to do our work in the classroom and then to read all that research that is happening all the time, which is their job, actually. I mean, that's the job of the people, the cognitive scientists and all those who work in that area.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Deena. Dear guests, if you don't have any other questions, everybody thanking you, Dr. Deena. It was a great session indeed, actually. Very enlightening for all of us.
Yeah, and me too. I'm sharing
learning styles.
My own enlightenment, to be honest. I felt the same. My beloved learning styles, I have given it up, guys. I just want you to know it wasn't easy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Deena. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So dear attendees, this is like the end of our session today. Please go and you're encouraged to attend other sessions in other rooms. We have 4 other rooms. Take a look at the schedule at a glance and fill out the reflection form that we sent you earlier. Thank you so much.